Back in May, Secretary of Transportation Duffy announced 52 deregulatory actions to be taken at the Department of Transportation. Since then, there's been a lot of discussion on whether these regulatory actions are going to have a very big impact or not for our lives out on the road. My name is Kris. I'm the compliance manager here at ATS. I'm going to be taking you through just some of those 52 deregulatory actions to see how big of an impact are they going to have on our daily lives. All right, so starting off with motor carrier routing regulations, the FMCSA proposes to repeal part of the Code of Federal Regulations that concerns servicing municipalities and unincorporated communities. In short, there's just some strange regulation that takes up a single page of the Green Book that has to do with carriers that operate around post offices in small unincorporated towns, think 150 people or smaller. It outlines some areas where they can and can't drive, and it's largely unnecessary nowadays. It's one of the old weird holdovers from the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission. So how big of an impact will this have on everyday drivers? Minimal to almost none, I would argue. Number 2, Appendix B, 49 CFR, Part 386, the civil penalties in paragraph A1. Basically, this is a proposal to amend the FMCSA regulations to remove references to the rules of the Department of Transportation's procedures regarding the civil penalty schedule. Instead, they're going to refer solely to the Code of Federal Regulations, where that program is incorporated. Again, it's a little bit of a redundancy, not really necessary to have two different schedules for civil penalties, so how big of an impact will this have? Minimal, negligible, arguably none. Number 3, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation, certification, and labeling requirements for rear impact protection guards. One of the kind of odd regulations that's out there is that if you have a rear protection guard, some of us call them an ICC or an incoming car catcher, there actually is a regulation that says you have to have a label from the manufacturer stating that it's certified and can withstand the impact of a car coming. The argument is that over time, as a truck is going up and down the road, getting salt sprayed on it, gravel, road debris, that label will wear off, and should a driver receive a violation for the label or the marking getting worn off. The argument is that it's a redundant thing, that if we have an incoming car catcher on it installed by the manufacturer, that we're okay. So moderate impact, I would probably say, on this one. It's not really a real big one. I don't see a whole lot of drivers being put out of service or receiving roadside violations on it, so it's not really truly enforced right now anyway. Number 4, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation, retroreflective sheeting on semi-trailers and trailers. So the FMCSA proposes to rescind the requirements for reflective sheeting on semi-trailers and trailers manufactured prior to 1993. This is one of the ones where it's kind of fun to look and see how once something gets written into code, it stays there. Basically, trailers manufactured prior to 1993 didn't necessarily need to have the reflective sheeting on it, so they put a date that you had to put reflective sheeting or tape back onto the trailer. I don't know how many trailers, and the FMCSA agrees with this, but we're not sure how many trailers are actually on the road still in use 32 years later that haven't already had their reflective sheeting placed on it. For the average driver at any carrier, if you're hauling modern equipment, not going to have an impact on you whatsoever. Number 5, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation, spare fuses. So the FMCSA is proposing a rule to remove the requirement for commercial motor vehicles to be equipped with at least one spare fuse of each type that truck runs on. The argument here is that the proposed change removes an unnecessary requirement and doesn't impact safety regulations. I can understand their explanation for that. Most modern trucks that are manufactured after, I think, 2010 or so, they run primarily on circuit breakers. So you're not going to have a whole lot of fuses. You're going to have mostly circuit breakers and relays. So this one I think can go either way, but if we look at the data on how many drivers actually are receiving violations for not having spare fuses on a roadside, I think we'd see that the number of drivers impacted by this is going to be minimal. Number 6, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation regarding liquid burning flares. So the FMCSA proposes to remove references to liquid burning flares from the warning device requirements in the regulations. Again, this is another one where I'm not sure how many drivers nowadays are carrying a liquid flare. I think sometimes they're called a fusee. Most of us are now carrying reflective triangles, or the few of us that are still carrying flares, we're doing the solid stick style. So this one again is, I'm not sure how many of us are still carrying these old school style weird flares. So this one's probably going to be pretty low impact. Number 7, removal of self-reporting requirement. So the FMCSA proposes to revise its regulations requiring a commercial driver's license holder to self-report motor vehicle violations to their state of domicile. Again, this one makes actually a bit of sense. Some drivers will probably remember back in the day having to write down all the violations they received on a piece of paper and fax it or scan it or e-com it over to their carrier at the end of the year. Or on their anniversary date with their carrier. This is part of what that is. That had started being phased out in 2024, actually, and now they're just gonna axe it wholesale, saying that, well, just about every state licensing agency is required to have electronic MVR records that they share with each other's state. So I think this is actually one of the few ones that is going to have a high impact because that's less work for you to have to do. Number 8, removal of obsolete references to water carriers. So the FMCSA proposes to remove all obsolete references to water carriers in the FMCSRs. This one, to me, it makes absolute perfect sense. It seems a little weird to differentiate water carriers from every other tanker on the road, because how else would we haul water? But realistically, at the end of the day, water carriers and tankers were regulated in the same way. They had to follow a lot of the same rules and guidelines, so really, the impact that we're going to have is probably low. Number 9 is a fun one, and this one is one that I saw people talking on Reddit an awful lot about back in, I think it was February, when President Trump first announced that they were going to start looking at removing and deregulating the DOT. And so that is rescinding the requirement for ELD operators manuals located in commercial motor vehicles. So they're proposing a rule that says you no longer have to carry the user manual of the ELD in the truck itself. The rationale behind it makes perfect sense to me. So if we just think about it from a logical perspective, if you already get trained on how to use your ELD and we still have to carry the manual in case I forget overnight how to use my device, it seems a little mean. I'm not sure. So it's just an odd, strange requirement that they make us do. But again, I'm not sure exactly how many drivers are actually receiving a violation for this specific regulation on the roadside. Where a lot of the talk and the hubbub came through was, I saw it on Reddit and I think the forums on CDL Life, where a lot of people were speculating, oh, they're going to start dialing back some of the enforcement on ELDs in general. But the user manual, I think, is probably one of the lowest impact areas that we could possibly deregulate the ELD mandate. So low impact. So those are all proposed rescinding orders. There's also a few amending orders. So number 1 in the amending orders is another one that online and on Reddit, there was an awful lot of talk about it, and there's still some debate about it even now that it's been fully published what the proposed rule is. But they're saying that if you are a bus driver, if you're hauling hazmat and you come up on a railroad crossing and it actually has arms and a control measure, that you no longer have to stop at it. That's the short and easy version. We can go ahead and discuss this in the comments if you want. I know there's already vigorous discussion on Reddit whether this is a good idea or not, so I'm not really going to pitch a whole lot to it myself. So I'd like to hear what you have to say on that one. But one thing I will point out that I think a lot of folks have been getting wrong on this one is, if you are one of those regulated carriers and you come up on a railroad crossing, let's say it's way out in the sticks and there's no crossing arms, there's no stoplights, there's no stop sign, it's just a crossbuck and that's it, saying railroad crossing. Those would, to my interpretation, you would still have to stop at those railroad crossings before proceeding. So it doesn't apply to everyone, just those that are actively controlled. All right, number 2 in amending, electronic driver inspection reports. FMCSA is proposing to clarify the requirement to complete a daily vehicle inspection report based on public comment filed by the national tank truck carriers, saying that the DVIR may already be completed electronically, so we're proposing explicit language to make this clear. Kind of redundant, doesn't really change anything, not really a recension of anything because we're already allowed to submit DVIRs electronically. So again, low impact. So in amending, number 3, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation, license plate lamps. The FMCSA proposes to provide an exemption from the lamp and reflective device requirements for license plate lamps on the rear of the truck while you're towing a trailer. They're saying that this has a minimal impact and it doesn't impact safety at all. I would have to agree with that to an extent. As we all know as drivers, sometimes it does happen where you have to drop a trailer at one location and pick up another one somewhere else. So my fear working in compliance is that drivers may use that exemption as an excuse to put off getting their trucks fixed, because no driver has ever done that. So low impact on that one. All right, so number 4, parts and accessories necessary for safe operation, tire load markings. The FMCSA proposes to revise requirements for tires on commercial motor vehicles to clarify that the FMCSRs do not require tire load restriction markings on their sidewalls. Tires are one of the ones that generally would have a high impact because that is one of the highest volumes of violations that we see drivers receiving on roadsides is related to tires and driving on flat tires. But specifically, I think we see more drivers driving on damaged tires or underinflated, not necessarily driving on tires that aren't rated to do the work that we see. So while it might seem like it's going to have a high impact, I think this one's going to be pretty low. Yeah, as we can see, a lot of these things are really low impact. So I'll put a qualifier in there that, in my opinion, as a compliance manager, I always think it's easier to navigate simpler regulations. So any effort to try to make it easier to read through the green book and figure out what am I doing and how do I do it right is usually a good effort. But as you argue in the comments, just keep in mind, most of these things, they're not going to impact us on a day-to-day basis. And just to further illustrate that, we only highlighted a few. There were 52 total deregulatory actions, and of those 52, 43 are still in the notice of proposed rulemaking. So they're not even final yet. It could be a year, it could be 3 years. It could take some time until we see all these actually make it into final rules and final revisions. So in the meantime, keep checking back with us here at the channel, and we'll keep you up to date as we see those rules come through.